Hey guys, thanks for coming to the green room. I have my green background today, which is like literally the first time that I've had a full green background. So this is great. And Alex is wearing green, so this is awesome. Anyway, well, thank you guys for joining. This is, I believe, the 11th episode, and we started it because mental health is something that everybody struggles with, especially in our artist community. And I feel like it's just really a raw conversation about how we feel, and obviously be as comfortable as everybody feels comfortable with. So usually how we started off is Hannah likes to do her cute little intros.
Welcome to the Green Room. So today we have Jenna Andrews, founder of the Green Room, also platinum singer, songwriter, vocal producer, and executive producer for artists such as BTS, Benny, Lily Allen, Noah Cyrus, J-Lo, Little Mix, Drake, to name a few. Jenna also A&Rs Noah Cyrus and Lennon Stella at Records, and is the co-owner of 27 Music Publishing with Barry Weiss and Sony ATV. Next up, we have Janice Whitlock. Janice is a coach, scholar, and writer in the areas of adolescent and young adult mental health and well-being. She has devoted her professional life to enhancing youth and women's well-being and has over 30 years of experience. She is currently a senior advisor for the JED Foundation and a research scientist at Cornell University. Welcome, Janice. Next up, we have Alex Hope. Alex Hope is an Australian writer and producer now based in Los Angeles and signed to Sony ATV Music Publishing. Hope started her career with her contribution to Troye Sivan's album Blue Neighborhood, including singles Wild featuring Alessia Cara, Heaven, and Youth. Hope is also known for her production and collaborations with Alanis Morissette, Tegan Sara, Selena Gomez, Tovlo, Alec Benjamin, Ben Platt, Troye Sivan, Jack Antonoff, Rabel, etc., etc. And finally, we have Tegan Sara, who need no introduction, but I will attempt to give one. They have 9 studio albums and 1 New York Times best-selling memoir called High School, which will also be out in paperback worldwide on November 17th. Tegan and Sara also have a new original holiday song, Make You Mine This Season, co-written and produced by Alex Hope, and featured in the upcoming feature film Happiest Season. Tegan and Sara are also the founders of the Tegan and Sara Foundation to improve the lives of the LGBTQ plus women and girls. Welcome, Tegan and Sara.
Guys, we need to have like the clapping and applause sound. That's my next thing. Like, yay! No, I really appreciate you guys coming on, especially since we are fellow Calgarians, which is so crazy.
I know, it's very strange. It's weird. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but sometimes when I run into Albertans out in the wild, I mean, sometimes I've run into people that are from Alberta, Europe or wherever, and it delights me. It might be like the best kind of run-in. I just moved over to a little island off the coast of Vancouver, and I met my neighbors last night, and they're from Edmonton, which is another city in the province of Alberta. And I can't stop thinking about how cool and how random that is. And I know to no one else that will be interesting, but I get excited.
Yeah, I mean, no, but it makes you feel like immediately more comfortable, right? Like I feel like Canadians naturally bond with each other because it's like you're from the same place. So if it's even like Calgary, which is like obviously a smaller place to be from, you're like, oh my God, have you been to Chinook Mall?
Yeah, we should just throw out like tons of private sort of, you only know the joke if you live in like, I can't wait to get Peter's Drive-In, and everyone will be like, what?
Oh my God, yes, we have to. What is when I was thinking, what I realized yesterday is Harvey's is a Canadian thing, which I literally didn't know. Like, you guys, Alex, you don't know what Harvey's is, right? Yeah, Harvey's is like our In-N-Out burger. And I was talking to my brother about it, and I was like, wait, Harvey's is not American. This is so funny because my brother's girlfriend did like a commercial or something for Harvey's. I was like, oh my God, there's so much stuff in like, what is it? Kraft dinner. We call macaroni and cheese. That's not an American thing either. Toque.
You should really change the whole premise of this podcast to just talk about things that are Canadian.
I know. But anyway, we're here to talk about coming out and obviously to improve the lives of the LGBTQ community. And obviously, it's such a broad subject. And I sort of, again, with this particular show, I just encourage to be as open and raw as possible, and anything that you guys feel comfortable, or particular stories that you want to share for people watching. Obviously, we leave a 20-minute, sort of 15-minute, 20-minute space for people to ask questions at the end. So honestly, this is just really about sharing experiences that might help females going through the same thing. So I don't know, I guess to kick off everything, is there anything specific to start with? Or I know obviously you guys have your book about your high school experiences. I would love to hear sort of what made you feel like writing that book, or like the memoir, something that particularly happened in high school that inspired you guys to come out.
We always, when we were doing our press tour, the easiest way to sort of frame it was that for so many years, I mean, over 20 years, we've been trying to answer these really complicated questions about our sexuality, our identity, our band, in these little sound bites. You get asked a question and everything sort of gets watered down, or it gets, I don't know, misunderstood because it's not sort of in context. And the book, the memoir, really gave us an opportunity to really zoom in on some significant years in our adolescence where we were able to figure out, or at least start to figure out, some really important things, not just about being queer, but about being artists and our relationship as sisters, and the relationship we were going to have, with the sort of like outside world once we were sort of like out of our parents' house and trying to become musicians. And I think the book really did give us this opportunity to share that story in more depth, and also give us permission, I guess, to have a bigger sort of conversation about it with our audience, our fan base, and press and each other. We don't often talk about our adolescent years with each other. We don't really, it's been a long time. We're 40, like we don't sit around very often talking about like when we were 15, but it was a really wonderful a wonderful way to sort of like dig into a lot of artifacts and archival materials from that time that we had never gone back and looked at, not as like young people, not as adults looking at ourselves as young people, but also not as like songwriters and artists. Like I hadn't spent any time with my first music and, the first trials and tribulations of like what it is to be an artist. So anyways, that's the book. And I think it's horrifies people to think about high school, but for us, it was actually quite healing.
Well, what was there a particular age that you guys identified being gay or coming out, or that feeling of, sort of feeling different? Like and also just a question to both of you, like, did it sort of happen at the same time, or was it something that you guys sort of, tell me about that.
Well, I think both Sarah and I, it might not be right, we haven't pinpointed the exact age, but I think we always knew we were different. I think we both sort of tracked back all the way to when we were like 5 or 6 years old, recognizing that we weren't like other girls, and not just because we were tomboys. I think that we just felt different. And I think probably we, like some of that is just because we're identical twins and we were really inseparable with each other. So I think we just always thought we stood out, or we were different than other girls because we were twins. But I think as we got older and hit puberty, it was like, oh, we're not just different because we're twins and because we're tomboys. I think we were already at a very young age grappling with the feelings that we had for girls were really different than the feelings we had for boys. And as a teenager, Sarah and I, we were surrounded by boys. We loved boys. We hung out with so many boys. We started dating boys when we were really young. And I think that was also really confusing when it came to sexuality, because it was like, oh, I loved having boyfriends. We were like kind of boy crazy in a way. But later on, again, once you get into like adulthood, reframing that with all the experience and understanding we have now of sexuality and ourselves, I think there's a real fine line between wanting to be with boys and wanting to be boys. And I think that it was like, as we got to, like, you just wanted the way the power and the energy and the interest that girls have in boys. I think that was what we were probably coveting. And yeah, so, but in terms of knowing we were queer, I mean, we talk about this a lot in our high school memoir, that we both understood as we got into high school that we were interested in and attracted to girls. I think for Sarah, it happened really fast and sooner than me. I think for me, it was an unraveling, because I'd still had like a really hot boyfriend who was my best friend. He's still my best friend to this day. And like, so I didn't understand, like I knew Sarah was having secret relationships with girls, but I was also like, well, girls are fine. I mean, we have all this video footage and all these notes where I'm defending homosexuality. And I think homosexuality is amazing. And what an incredible gift to be able to love people of the same sex. Like I had all these very progressive alternative thoughts. And yet I was like, but I have my boyfriend and he's so, good looking, but man, is he ever boring? Like I'm literally working it out in my journal, like trying to understand why there's no spark between us. And yet I feel so comfortable with him. So it took me a little bit longer. And in conclusion, I will say that probably maybe from my perspective anyway, that's the part of our story that seems to be most interesting to people, is that Sarah and I never spoke about it. We never talked about our sexuality. Wow. We never spoke about having relationships with girls. We never spoke about our interest. When Sarah came out, it wasn't even really a coming out. She'd gotten caught, and it was a horrible experience for her. And we never sat down and talked about it. And when I came out, I just showed up with my girlfriend and was like, clearly this is a lesbian, and so am I. It was like, and that was unspoken. So we're not necessarily a typical coming out story, but maybe that's what we've learned in the last 20 years, is there is no typical standard coming out. You do it in the way you do it. It can be weird, it can be awkward, it can be easy, it can be difficult, it can be very surprising. My mom was very progressive. She's a therapist. She handled Sarah's coming out horribly, and she recovered quickly, but you just never know. And you just got to be patient and get through the experience. But it was just really different for both of us. So
actually, I was watching the David Letterman interview with Ellen last night. I noticed that two things that she said. Have you guys seen that?
No.
So
did it just come out?
No, I think it came out a year ago, but I just watched it, and I noticed that two things that she said that I found really interesting. And I wanted to ask you guys, if when I was watching it, coincidentally, I was like, oh, this could actually be something to ask you guys, because it was just literally a coincidence. But basically, she said that, like, as you're explaining, you kind of like knew you're different growing up and feeling like, I don't know, like, again, you're with boys, but you feel like, obviously more, you can't even identify being attracted to girls, but like more interested by girls or whatever, right? So she was basically saying, like, she knew that she felt that. And there was two circumstances. One thing she said, she was in an elevator one day, and she remembers being like 7 or 8 years old, and the man in the elevator was like, oh, what a cute little boy. And in her head, she was like, I hope they really think I'm a boy. Like, so basically saying, like, I hope they don't say, and like, she was like, I hope my dad or mom or whatever doesn't actually say I'm a girl. Cause like, she thought that was such a compliment. She's like, oh my God, I hope they actually think I'm a boy. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I found that so interesting, because you just said that you feel like, in terms of being a tomboy and all these kind of things in a way, right?
Well, I think that it's not until childhood and that this, truly became clear. But I think we conflate gender and sexuality. And oftentimes when, kids are presenting as like, so for us, we were presenting more like boys and we were tomboys, that gets confusing now. It's like, oh, well, you're presenting as tomboys, you must be gay. And it's like, no, I have tons of, all of our straight girlfriends were presenting as tomboys and they were not gay. So I think we have to be really careful about how we conflate those two things. And I also think that, because I think it's, for me, even now as a 40-year-old woman, I sometimes feel like not judged, and maybe some of the other queers can speak to this, but there are some weird things that come up, because like Sarah and I both have longer hair right now. And so some queer people, they're like, well, are you trying to present as more straight? And it's like, no, I just like having more options. And also it's COVID, and getting a haircut and, doing all those things all the time is harder, but there's some, I think there's still judgment, or there's assumptions, like if you're gay, you should look a certain way. And so I don't know, I think our gender expression as young people was, to really get into it, Janice can jump into this, but I think it was about our dad leaving, and us actually really missing our dad, and we wanted to have his haircut, and we only wanted one ear pierced to look like him. And then my mom started dating this really hunky guy, Bruce, who's in the book and is a really wonderful, wonderful man, and was a great dad to us. And he also was like extremely masculine and had one earring and a leather jacket and short hair. And I think actually our gender presentation probably had more to do with just wanting to like look like them and be like them and be accepted by them, and probably had less to do with us being gay. But armchair therapist over here is going to go with that. And
well, I mean, Janice, yeah, this would be a good time for you to chime in. I would love to see what you have to say about that. Or
I mean, yeah, I mean, like one of the things I read your book and I loved it. One of the things I noticed the most is just the slow process of coming out that it was for you guys. And I mean, I'm not in a good position to say whether or not your presentation was tied to your dad without knowing you better, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially since you need to, at least unconsciously, you would have probably been looking for a template or something to kind of identify with some of the more masculine traits. But one of the questions that that kind of kept percolating up for me is how different, because I'm just not that much older than you, but I one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is how I've got half of my adult life on one side of the technological divide and the other half so far on the other side. And I'm wondering how you think your coming out process was different than it might be now, or how, if you've been growing up now as queer in the current age with social media landscape, how that might have changed things, and especially how that might have affected or not affected your mental health. Would it made it easier, harder? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's an interesting question, especially because Tegan and I are currently working on a fictional graphic novel that deals with a much younger version of Tegan and Sara who are growing up today, who have technology, who have access to technology to think about themselves and investigate themselves in a sort of different kind of, more private kind of way. But, our mom has said, if she had so much language and she had so much more understanding than the average person, I think, for that time. And so, part of our slow coming out was also, I think that we were, I don't know exactly how to articulate it, except to say that I think my mom would have, if my mom hadn't had her suspicions and hadn't been sort of slowly feeding us information or strategically feeding us information about like what I assume she was suspicious of, it was sort of like, oh, I brought you some movies to watch with your friends, and they all happen to be sort of gay, I think that she groomed us to be gay, so that was why we were so horrified when she was upset that we were gay. We were like, what? You made us this way.
Oh my
I think no, God, let's not spread that rumor. But I think I think that she was extremely tuned into the fact that we were really, we were different kinds of kids. We were having different kinds of relationships. And, I was going to say too, that it wasn't just the way that we were behaving or the way that we were identifying. It was also the way people responded to us. Girls loved us. Girls loved us since we were little. We just had this thing. It was like partly because we were twins. We were really cute and little and whatever. But like, I think, for our friends and family, like there was something, I think if you were observing us in any capacity, you could see that there was something quite magnetic about us. And so we were getting this attention. And that is such a cover blow, because it's like, you are trying to like keep your feelings in check, like, oh yeah, I like girls, but then girls are actually paying a lot of attention. It's really hard to hide that that's not like extremely satisfying. And I think my mom could see that these girls were like flocking to us and were so interested in us and very, they wanted very deep. They wanted deep, intimate
congratulations.
That's amazing.
But it did sort of prepare us for our future career, in music. But I will say that, just to sort of sum that up, I think our lives would be so different if we had been coming out in a time where we could have had more control and access over, figuring things out for ourselves. But I also think that, we had more than most people, and we still needed very different periods of time, lengths of time to integrate that. Like I was ready probably years before Tegan, because I had just sort of happenstance, like whatever, found girls that wanted to have relationships with me. And so I already sort of had figured a lot of stuff out and was ready to sort of like emerge. Whereas I think Tegan, it was a little bit more like, the details sort of were like, there was like little bits and pieces, but she hadn't sort of like been able to sort of attach all of that together yet. And maybe with technology, Tegan would have had an easier time, or maybe with technology. I was going to say that I don't think I don't think social media,
it might have kept us more in the closet longer.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe we would have had to be even more protective. But I will say that I do think access to information would have been huge. And I think that that's what, I mean, certainly in our lives and our career and with our work with the foundation, why representation is so important. I think that there were certain examples of what being a queer, or at that time, what being a homosexual was, which is the word we used. And we would sometimes use the word gay, but gay, lesbian, homosexual, all of it felt pretty like you would lower your voice a little bit. So you'd say like, oh, they're homosexual, you know? And so we were really obsessed as adolescents with homosexuality, with identification, stereotyping, the way people dress, class. We grew up in a very mixed neighborhood. There was a lot of violence, a lot of drugs, a lot of like interesting stuff happening. And we were very curious. And I think we were able to squeeze homosexuality in there in between a bunch of other things, you know? And my mom was a feminist and very progressive, and she was always taking us to rallies and things. So it was like, you know, we care about this and we care about that. And we were very interested in homosexuality, you know? So there was like a lot of research happening. But if we had had the ability to like Google, like, what does being gay really mean, or gay people, I think that it probably would have helped me. I just think there was no woman my age besides Sarah that I could relate to. There was no queer representation in any of the media or things until we were in grade 12. And then there was a couple movies that came out that had younger, but still a decade older probably than us. And so I think for me, representation would have probably changed my coming out. So circling back to your question, I think that if I were gay now, I probably would have come out or figured myself out way sooner. But I don't think that, like, I think it's very, very, I think that it's wrong to think that now it's easier to come out, or that young people have an easier time, because I think that they might just know who they are sooner, but I don't know that. I think coming out is all about your own journey, and it's about figuring it out. It's why I think it's absolutely monstrous what happens in so many different places, including our home province of Alberta under the Conservative government. We are as adults, and government officials, we are fixated on how kids come out and when people should find out and how they should gather. And I think it's really, really perverse. And I think it's really unfortunate, because sexuality is still linked to sex. And so you giving kids facts is super important, but you also need to let young people get comfortable with it. Like for me, I didn't want to talk about my sexuality because it meant talking about sex. And to this day, I cannot think of people I would rather talk about sex with than Sarah or my mom or any of these people. I do not want to talk about sex. I don't want to think about sex when it comes to those people. And I don't want them to think about sex when it comes to me. So I needed time. Young people need time, and they need to be able to see other people like them. And so that's part of what like made us want to write the book, is because I still think that it's super important to tell those stories and to reassure people that even these fools who grew up to be confident and ambassadors for sexuality, it took us a long time to figure it out. And we were really homophobic. We were really afraid of it for a long time. And that's normal. And that's okay. You can still feel terrified to come out in 2020. Janice, your kitties are so cute.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I can't really tell them like kids to not be here, so they're part of it.
Well, speaking of coming out, well, in 2020, but 2019, Alex, I would love to hear your story, and I know how close you are with Tegan and Sara, and obviously, you know, a big part of the green room too is being able to see how much music can help us through our journeys. And obviously I know that's really big for you guys, obviously, and I think for all of us. And I know, and it seems like with your experience, Alex, so I would love to hear about it if you're comfortable. Obviously,
yeah, I mean, I definitely relate a lot to what Tegan was saying. It took me a minute. Like, I think I always knew that I was different, and I remember like trying to come out to my mom, and her kind of stopping me and being like, "You've already done this." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "When you were little, you said, you know, it didn't matter, you know." And I was like, "Oh, damn, okay." But it was kind of this thing also where I kind of suppressed it. I really was like, I want to make music and I want to get to this place and do this thing. And I almost had it like really low on the priority list. I was like, I'll get to that when I'm like been in therapy a little bit longer, like, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, then I'll like open that up and like sort through it, which is really weird. But I think that's just how my brain kind of was handling it. And so up until that point, I feel like I was like avoiding, I had a lot, all my friends were boys that like growing up, I was always just kind of the only girl. And I think that I also kind of was like mildly petrified of queer women, because I'm like, they know, like they're gonna know, and I'm not ready for anyone to know, and they're gonna know. And so I kind
we know.
Exactly. I was like, oh no, the minute they walk in the door, it's like I may as well just have it like written across my head. Like, and so I remember, and then, I mean, it's weird. I felt like when I met you guys and, you know, went to Canada and we started working on this record, it was weird. It was like, a couple of months before that, I was like, I think it's nearly time for me to like sort through these things in my head. And so, yeah, being in Vancouver for 2 months and being like surrounded by and making a record with queer women and like just also just women, like, you know, just being in that environment, it was just like all these things. And I think I got back from that trip and was like, okay, you know, now it's all right. And it's weird because it's not like I have such an amazing like family and such amazing friends, and the music industry really helped because it's so queer and progress. Like I was just meeting all these people in sessions and I was just like, damn, this is great. Like I'm learning a little bit about myself and this person, and it was kind of all these bits and pieces, and it just kind of, yeah, it took me, I knew, but I just was still, there's just always that thing. And now in retrospect, I'm like, what was that? When I knew, but I was like, why couldn't I just be like.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever asked you this, but when we first met you, like we came over to your home studio and we met you, and Sarah asked at one point, because one of our big things, we were like,
I died. I died. Yeah, well, did you see the gay panic in my eyes?
Oh my God.
And I think I said I was bi.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So wait, when we were going to make the record, we said we really wanted to work with a female producer. Sarah and I have co-produced most of our records, but we'd never worked with another co-producer who was identifying as female, and so we made that a prerequisite. It was not a prerequisite that the woman be queer. We were just, you know. But when we came in to meet you, I think it was like we were at your house for a couple hours, but halfway through, Sarah said, "We really wanted someone who." Was female. We also loved that you're young, because, you know, this record that we just made, the record we made with you, were songs we wrote in high school. And we said that, I believe Sarah said that we needed someone like you because you would help us write emo lyrics, like to fill in the holes that, you know, with the songs that we were going to work on. And then I think Sarah went into this whole thing about the content of the songs or whatever. It's all about being closeted and being gay and queer identity and all this, whatever. And then Sarah just casually was like, are you gay? Like just meaning like just checking it out or whatever. And you, I'll never forget, you had like your vape thing, your hoodie up. It was like we were meeting with a 16-year-old. I was like, what in the hell is happening right now? And and then you did. You said, oh, well, like I believe you said you don't really date. And then you said, I'm bi. And we were like, oh, okay, cool. And we just like moved on. But afterwards we tracked, we were like, she died. Like definitely died, left her body, like clearly was, like,
I hate that you saw. I was like, oh, I think I handled that real cool. Like, you know.
Oh my God. That's
I was like, I don't. And also, yeah, I mean, relationships were so low on, I mean, I moved to LA when I was 21 and I was like on my own, didn't really know. And it was all about just like making my dream come true and like doing, and I wasn't like going out and like, you know, I was kind of, you know, and all my friends were guys, and
all of those things were red flags to me, because but this is my, I know
now in retrospect.
No,
I'm
but like I take full
responsibility.
I take full responsibility that this does not, in no way is every person's experience. But like, I started being obsessed with girls when I was like 4, you know? So like when you're like, I don't know, just like hanging out with dudes and making music. And I was like, no. There's got to be some fuel. There's got to be something in there. But I could read that on you really quickly, because I was like, yeah, I like hanging out with guys and making music too, but like you don't like someone, you're not dating, you're not interested in people, like come on, that's not true. I could just tell.
Yeah.
I remember
But
seeing the shift too, because you guys witnessed it. The transformation of Alex Hope. She used to be black hoodie up, vaping in her dark studio, and then when
I met her.
Yeah, when she came back from Vancouver, it was like this confidence. And I remember, I think you were walking in Vancouver, you called me as if you were about to tell me some big news. And I'm pretty sure you said to me, I think I'm gay. And I was like, that's awesome. What else do you want to talk about? Like that.
Well, I mean, Hannah, poor Hannah, like, is my kind of second therapist. And like, when I just need to like verbalize or vocalize things, I just call her and make her listen to me. And so I feel like you've known that this, you know, that it was always, there was just, that there was a thing.
There was
You
something
didn't know
holding
when
you back
it
from
was gonna
being-
like, when it was
Yeah.
gonna.
There was something holding you back from being your true self. And it was obvious. And I think it was obvious to a lot of people that met you, but everyone who loves you wanted to make sure you had the right amount of time to figure out what that was.
I mean, it's also really hard when everybody, I don't know if you guys, I mean, I like when they assume or they know or they tell you,
Yeah.
and it's tough because my parents are incredible, and like my dad, you know, would always say like, you know, boyfriend or girlfriend when referring to me, and like my mom, you know,
So sweet.
but it was so sweet, but it was almost like I was too young. I was just kind of like, I want to make this decision, like this is my thing to decide, like, you know, and if people kind of, you know, assumed or said little comments here and there, it was just like, I'm not there and I want this to be my decision, you know, my thing, and not this.
Yeah.
It kind of set me back a little bit, because then I was like wanting to go against the grain, like rebel and be like, no, I just went on a date with a boy and it was great, you know, almost like because I was just not ready, like I just hadn't done the other work there.
There's a lot of cultural pressure, I think, these days. You know, I think there's, again, this is yet another, what I see is sort of sometimes a really, really counterproductive stereotype or assumption, which is that like, oh, well, there's marriage equality and there's much more queer representation in the media, so it's easy to come out now. And there's this whole, like, obviously we've seen it with National Coming Out Day and all these things, like there's a lot of pressure on people. And I have adult friends who they're not hung up on their sexuality. They just aren't out to everybody. Like, you know, they're just not out to everybody. And I think that it's very North American, and it's very much embedded in our culture that you must be out to everyone. Everyone must know. You must be on blast. It must be, now sexuality is tied to politics and social justice. And it's got to be, that's hard. That's a lot of pressure when you haven't even met that person that kind of like knocks you off your feet. Like for me, I might've had questions about my sexuality, but it took falling in love with a girl for me to truly take in the magnitude of what was happening to me.
Yeah.
It's a big difference to just have in your head. And I'll say this about you, Alex, is that clearly you are a emotional, you know, deep person. And I when we met you, looking at your body of work and what you were capable of doing in the creative realm, it was clear to me that you had access to whatever, even maybe it wasn't out yet, or maybe I didn't even have to do with sexuality. It was just clear to me that you already had a lot of depth. So you were connected to it, regardless of if it was on the external part of your life. It was clear you were in touch with something. You were able to funnel emotion and energy into something. And as somebody who had access to songwriting and creativity, I didn't worry about you. The only thing that I worried about was that you drank out of that same Fiji bottle for the entire time that you were in Vancouver, and you kept refilling it, because I know about plastic and they're not meant to be used again and again and again. That was the only thing I worried about.
I can't believe that's still, you would just let it, go, Tegan, let it go.
But by the way, that is, so I was gonna chime in and ask you guys, like, was that for everybody? I mean, I'm assuming so, but in starting a music career, just across the board, I mean, for you guys, Tegan and Sara, and also Alex, like, was that primarily like a big reason in the beginning? I like ever a subconscious thought, like, if I say something or come out, this can stand in the way of my career? Like, was that one of the most challenging things, scary things? Just because music is such a big part of our lives again. So I would just assume that would be really scary.
Yeah. I think because we were in such a unique situation where we started our band in high school, and so our sort of like launching of our career publicly and my coming out were happening at the exact same time. I don't ever remember thinking I could be out in one place and not out in another. Like that didn't exist in my brain. It was sort of like everything was happening at the same time. And once I had started acknowledging that I was gay, I just couldn't, it was like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like it was 18, like I didn't exactly have like a poker face. Like it was like, I felt like I radiated, okay, I'm gay now. And all these people know. I'm not going to like then box it up and keep it a secret over here. Like for me, it was just very like, I'm just going to have to deal with this. And, did I worry that it would impact our career? It impacts our career. It impacts our lives. It impacts the way you all see us, the way that the world sees us, the way I see myself. I had a very keen understanding that it was like there's no magic strategy that allows you to be what, like, I think the question, what people really are asking is, are you afraid that you won't be as popular, or you won't be as successful, or you won't be seen this way? And for me, I always thought of that as, are you afraid that people won't see you as straight? And the truth is I'm not straight. So it's like, it became so clear to me that being out is just being myself, and anything that wasn't being myself then, was being represented as being straight. Like I've had so many queer friends. I dated a girl who was a public figure who didn't think it was acceptable. She didn't have to come out. She just wanted to be a musician. And I was like, but you want to be straight. Like that's what you want people to see, is that you are straight. They're not seeing you as nothing. They're not seeing you as a musician. They're seeing you as straight. And if you're not gay, if you're not admitting that you're gay, then you're just sort of riding that straight privilege. And I think like even at 17 or 18, I would never have had the language to say that, but I knew I didn't want to be seen as straight. And I was willing to accept that I was going to be less successful or in more danger or whatever came along with that, because I just wanted to be myself.
And you know what? That is so amazing, because I think for kids watching, and for any kids just struggling with coming out, and also having big dreams, and I just know that I have a lot of friends that I've heard, feel scared for these reasons. And I think, it is scary. It's like, feeling like the same people won't love you, or you won't be accepted in the field that you really want to, be accepted by. And again, I can't relate to it personally, but I would think that would be really hard. And also, like, on the flip side, I was going to ask, in a way, you just said how honest it is. And it's like, again, you wouldn't be Tegan and Sara without everything that you are, which is being gay. So there's something so amazing about saying, hey, be exactly who you are, and that's how you can be the best you and the most successful at what you want to do. Because otherwise, how can somebody believe it if you're just faking it forever? You know what I mean? Until you come to that point where you're like, wow, I'm like unapologetically myself. I think it's hard to do anything.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I think it's important though to acknowledge what a privilege it is to just be yourself, because I think that this is something that we've really worked on a lot over the last 20 years. And this is part of what inspired the foundation, is that at some point, Sara and I, we aren't just thriving and succeeding and just because we're being ourselves. We are very, very powerful, and we are very privileged, and we're based on certain standards, attractive, white, from a country where we had great education and social services and great parents. We, are thin. We have a musical career, but we've also accumulated an enormous amount of power, and we also have wealth. And that has allowed us to be ourselves and to thrive. And that is not how it is for the majority of women in our community, especially when you look at the, most marginalized and those that are struggling, whether it's because they are living in a rural community or don't have access to representation, or they are not one of those things I just, checked off. And so that's what made us start the foundation, and was probably the biggest shock when we started the foundation, was that we had disconnected from a huge part of our community. And we'd been out doing this, like, be you and everything's great. And look at us. And isn't it awesome? And you can be anything. And look, we did this. And I was like, well, first of all, our journey was an absolute nightmare. And at times it's been a slog. It's always a slog. And so if it's that hard for us, I can't even imagine how it is for so many people. But I think you're right that still putting that message out there and being ourselves is the key to our happiness. And each of, queer women and anyone who's just different or identifies as LGBTQ plus, like, has to at some point figure out what it is that will make them joyful and happy and live their best lives, for sure. And I think that for us, at some point, we shrugged off the majority of the fear that being ourselves was going to somehow hold us back, and also just came to terms with the fact that we were going to have a different journey and it wasn't going to be the same, and that there were going to be clubs we weren't going to be a part of, and that there have only been maybe 3 or 4 queer women who have openly and been out on the music charts, who have thrived and it's that just isn't accessible to us, and we just had to learn how to accept that. And I think that that's been part of our journey, is just to accept some of the limitations that come with being us. But it all balances
but Tegan,
gay is, but it balances out because being gay is amazing. And
it is amazing, but it did take a long time to get to a place where we could also say that it was amazing. And just for the record, I didn't come out at 18 because I was like, I want to be joyful and integrated. I came out at 18 because I had spent years depressed, suicidal, thinking that I was garbage and it was toxic, and that homophobia was eating me alive. And to come out was not me saying, now I can be joyful and be myself. What it was now I can begin the process of trying to figure out how to love myself and care about myself. And eventually, once that process had started, then I was able to look outward and say, now what can I do for the people around me in my community? Now that I've addressed my own mental and physical well-being, can I help other people, take stock of that? And sometimes when I think about that, I'm not thinking like, people like some of my friends who have been, not unable to address their sexuality. I'm not talking about coming out and being on the cover of a magazine and saying I'm gay. I'm talking about looking in the mirror and not feeling like you're a piece of shit. Like, that's what I'm talking about. I've these women that I have been friends with or I have been close with who are homophobic, they're doing damage to other people and to themselves in their state. They're not living joyfully in the closet being like, I don't need to tell everyone. They're hurting, and they're hurting other people because of it. And I think that, and I was too, like, I recognize that in those women because I was that woman, and I was self-hating and self-loathing. And so I didn't have a lot of respect for myself, my body, or other people. And so once I was able to sort of like address those things and sort of get right with myself, that was like, okay, that's where the like real work starts, in the world.
You guys, can I ask you a question about that? What do you think was, what was the key, what was the turning point of being able to kind of go in that, from that dark night of the soul? Sarah, you just talked about it, but I imagine Tegan and Alex have thought about this too, to being able to love yourself. I mean, what are the ingredients? Because I think those are the things that I imagine you're trying to work forward through your foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I will say that, and this has been a point, not a point, maybe a point of contention isn't the right way to articulate it, but it's always been a sticky point between Sarah and I didn't experience those things. I definitely felt foggy and confused about sexuality, but when I fell in love with a girl for the first time, I felt nothing but excitement. I felt awkward about it, like telling people, and I didn't rush. It took me almost 2 years to come out, but I never felt embarrassed, afraid. I've indirectly have suffered very little homophobia, I feel like. But I have like dated a lot of women who aren't out or who struggled. I've dated a lot of really religious people, and they've struggled with coming out to their families, and I've seen it firsthand. And like I said, it's a sticky point between Sarah and I, because I always wanted, I'm better at it now and equipped to do it with more support, but like it was hard. We're seen as being identical, so our experiences should be identical. So when Sarah would talk about how hard it was for her, and then I would follow up with, I don't know, it was like kind of okay. Like I just accepted it. It made it feel like I was taking away from Sarah's story, which is a twin issue and not a gay issue. It's just like, we're not allowed to have our own identities. And I hate that Sarah has ever had to like minimize how hard it was for her just because it wasn't hard for me. But for me, there wasn't an enormous amount of work. I wasn't as triggered by homophobia in our press. I wasn't, and I don't know why. And I don't know what the ingredient is. I really don't. I don't know what it was, other than, as Sarah said, maybe I sucked up, like she Sarah was bigger when we were born, so maybe she got the nutrients, but I got all the confidence. I just always had an innate like confidence about who I was. We wrote one song and I was like, we're gonna be famous. You know, I fell in love with one girl and was like, all right, I'm into this. I don't know. It's, you know, I don't know.
No, I mean,
questions that have come through, if I can just chime in with those.
Yeah,
So one question came through. I am ace and don't always feel seen in queer spaces. How can I make room for myself and other people on the ace spectrum?
Yeah, you know, this comes up a lot because I think that there's so many of us included in the LGBTQ plus spectrum that, you know, we sometimes end up talking about ourselves as if we are aware or having a similar lived experience to someone else who identifies, you know, elsewhere on the spectrum. And I think, you know, I don't necessarily, don't know necessarily in this case what I could offer, except to say that I want them to know that we in the community need to be more understanding, inclusive, and be better allies to each other. Because I can definitely say, even, you know, I have dated a lot of bisexual women and like talk about an invisible part of our, you know, our community who I used to make jokes or think like, what's the big deal? Or like, what, how can you feel isolated or whatever it is? And I think like our lived experiences within the community are so important to talk about. And finding people within the community who can go there with you and who can support you and be good allies is key. And I mean, taking it back to the question earlier about technology or the topic of technology, one thing I think that's great for our community, and especially some of the parts of our community who feel a little more invisible, there is such a vibrant online community for, you know, for connecting over not just your identity, but over the things that you like, you know, whether it's like video games or it's animals or it's gardening or it's whatever. It's like finding people you can connect to, not just about your identity,
Sarah just listed all her interests for those.
I know. I just
There's like, maybe you're into cats or you're into gardening or you're into complicated graphic novels that didn't sell well, but are definitely extremely well done. There you go. You can find those people too.
oh my God.
And what kind of advice would you give to people who are in quarantine and gay and trying to figure out how to tell their families?
Alex?
Oh, I think it very much depends on the situation. Yeah, I mean, I think the technology, I definitely have found that the internet, I don't know, I feel like that has definitely helped me being able to kind of like read and see, like, just, yeah, again, the representation. It's honestly the same as when I was kind of like Googling like female producers, like trying to find people that were doing what I was doing, you know, it's kind of the same thing. And you know, and you're not seeing it on TV all the time or in, like, it's just you're just fed this kind of thing. So I think, I mean, if it's not like a safe place maybe to like come out, it, you know, I think that, yeah, as Tegan Sara was saying, like the internet, you can find kind of community and some support there. I don't know, what do you guys think?
I like that. I also immediately, the thing that came back to me, Janice asked such a great question about coming to terms with yourself and all that, and you didn't get an opportunity to answer. And even as your friend, I feel like I can't even think of like what, I know it was your joke that you came to Vancouver, but like in the context of your career, like were you worried that being out would change how, like, that people wouldn't want to be in the room with you or that you wouldn't get as many opportunities? And like, what did actually change for you? Like what, because I think that could also help with that answer to that question. Like, how did it change? Like, what, you came to Canada and you hung out with a bunch of gay people all the time, but like, really, what happened for you? Like, what did something actually change inside?
I mean, I think that I started realizing that there's a lot of stuff going on like subconsciously in my mind and brain. And I think, I don't know, I don't know if you guys agree, but there's something really powerful about being like seen by, even though I was like trying to run away from queer women, when you are like seen and you're kind of having, and I talked to you guys a bunch and I talked to Rachel Finland, the engineer, we were staying together, and like, I just was talking about it all the time. And Rachel also should be paid as my third therapist, because she had to, like, every night we'd go get dinner after, like, and I was just kind of like working through bits and pieces. And I don't know. I think definitely subconsciously I was probably like, oh, what is this gonna, I'm also one of the very few kind of like female producers. I was like kind of in that, and I was like, oh God, do I want to add this thing? And then, I think, I really don't love, I'm behind the scenes for a reason. Like I really don't like being, and I just always felt like there was this obligation. I already felt an obligation to like young female producers to talk. And then I was like, oh no, this feels like a very like performative, like this just feels like something that that people like scream from the rooftops. And I don't know if I want to do that. And like, there was just kind of, I don't know. I think I got to a point where I was much more confident in myself. I felt settled in LA. I had a really great group of friends. Like I felt fine. I just felt comfortable for the first time. And I think that I then just let myself explore it. I was like, just come on, it's time. Like you're just overthinking and overthinking and overthinking. And also I felt the pressure of having to like come up with this answer so people can put me into a neat little box and it's like all good. I was like, I don't want to burden people with my like sorting it out process. And I'm still like, it seems like a ongoing lifelong process of like, who am I and what is this and what is that? And so I kind of felt like I can't do it until I have like this perfect neat little, which is this is what society has kind of done. I was like, I need to have this neat little thing so people can just go, okay, and I was like, I don't have that yet. I don't know. And I also felt what you were saying, Tegan, is like, I need to have an experience, or I need to like be justified in this. Cause what if I come out and then I have an experience and I'm like, wait, no. And then I have to, there's all these things your mind just, I just was.
Well, maybe that's the advice though. Then maybe that's the answer is that like there, Sarah and I were actually talking to someone about this a couple of weeks ago, because there does seem to be some fear around coming out or about vocalizing your desire to experiment or your questioning. Like the fear is that you're going to change your mind and then everyone's going to be like, well, but you said you were gay. And maybe for all of us, it's just baking into our understanding of ourselves that it can change, that it can evolve, that it can sometimes be experience-based, that there is all this societal pressure that Sarah said this earlier and you just said a version of it, but first and foremost, it's about getting right with yourself and understanding yourself and loving yourself and being okay with it. And then it's just like you just said, it's being seen. So that can be one person, and it doesn't have to be your mom or dad first. It doesn't have to be the most potentially, for some people, the most intense and most uncomfortable person to talk to. It can just be anyone.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't have to be all at once, and it doesn't have to be everyone. And for some people, it is just a rip the Band-Aid off, tell everybody I'm cool with it. But that is not actually how everyone does it. And that's okay. And I loved also what you said about you had a community, because I think that's really big too. We have a lot of friends who identify as queer, but most of them are in heterosexual relationships, but they identify as queer because at some point in their life, they did experiment and they did identify that a big part of themselves really is interested in that, and that maybe they didn't find the right person, but that still exists, and that queer identity is bigger. It's not just about sexuality, it's about gender expression, it's about the community of people that you hang out with and how you identify. That's a slippery slope though, because once we did explain to my stepdad, Bruce, why we identify as queer, and then he took all that in and he said, so I'm queer. And I was like, I've done a bad job in obviously explaining this. You were definitely not queer. but I think that queer culture, all of it, like taking in all the pieces to come to terms with who you are is a journey. And you're right, Alex, it is a lifelong thing. You will continue to experiment with that. You will continue to grapple with it at times and add to it and take away from it. And like, that is normal. So coming out or coming to terms with it during COVID with your parents, my thing would be like, turn the volume down. It doesn't have to be so intense. Maybe now isn't the right time, or maybe if it feels right, that's fine. But it's also okay not to pick this time. This is a really weird time.
It's funny though, because I feel like though, if I wasn't, I mean, now if I hadn't have kind of worked it out kind of when I did, I feel like this would be the time where I'm kind of forced to like be alone with my thoughts myself. Like work isn't as crazy, I'm not getting, everything slows down. I can only imagine, there's no escapism. I feel like for me, I was running and I was like, I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to like do this and do that. And I was just kind of all this escapism because I wasn't ready to deal with this thing. And so I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like there's probably a lot of young kids, especially with the internet and seeing more representation and finding themselves and seeing themselves. And, you know, I feel like now is probably, I don't know, I just feel like it's a little quieter, that maybe the thoughts are getting louder for a lot of young people. And I think I was thinking about this yesterday. I was like, yeah, if I hadn't have kind of worked it out, I was like, I'd be in it. Right. Well, I mean, I am in it right now, and I'm taking this time to, like, you know, keep working stuff out. But like, I just think this feels like it's probably a time for a lot of people that they stop and look at themselves, because there's not much else to do.
Well,
And
Tegan,
I just shared a link to the donate page for Tegan and Sara Foundation, but I'd love for you guys to talk a bit about that and Love Loud and every other way. Also, as an ally of the LGBTQ plus community, clearly I am not in it, Jenna's not in it, but I think advice to allies, which Alex and I talk about a lot, and how we can be helpful in your mission.
Yeah, I mean, the work that we do at the foundation is, I mean, a lot of it sort of fits in the buckets that we've talked about today, like mental health, physical health, you know, the sort of like the recognizing that there are so many people in our community who are, you know, might be struggling, and not just struggling with their identity or their sexuality, but like, you know, a host of different sort of intersectional identities or situations. And our foundation really took the sort of mission of like, is there work that we can do? Sometimes it's really just small gestures, but even small micro grants to community organizations, stuff that we can do that I guess in a way sort of doesn't just acknowledge, but recognizes the immediate need for a lot of people in our community. And so we do a lot of work in healthcare. We do a lot of work in representation. One of our favorite sort of programs, or a favorite of people who support us, is our work with LGBTQ summer camps. So these are summer camps that often have, you know, a sort of leadership, mentorship kind of, you know, infrastructure. A lot of the kids that are going to these camps are, you know, meeting some of their first like LGBTQ identified, you know, mentors or older folks and kids too, other kids. But this is a way to sort of help with community building and connection. In terms of allies, I don't know. That's my life journey, is trying not to feel completely, utterly disappointed in straight people all the time, because I feel consistently irritated. But I think it's just because it doesn't have to be that hard. Like, I think after 20 years, I can feel the pileup of like, I still don't like to feel like I'm being handled as this like delicate thing that I'm not quite sure what to say to you, and I still feel awkward. Like, there's just no reason for that anymore. It's just, you know, so I think as allies, I think it's like doing a lot of self-education. I'm not crying, I just have to cough, but I was holding it in. With COVID, it's not comfortable to cough anymore. So
I know, it's so funny, where even when you're on Zoom, you're like, don't worry, I'm not contagious. But I was gonna say, that's what Tegan, I was gonna say earlier too, on your comment of you guys being privileged and it not being so easy for everybody to come out, especially during this time and this year, and being alone, having all these thoughts, like you said, Alex. I feel like in a way though, this year more than ever has been a time to really like kind of find yourself. And I think that as much as it may be easier for you guys and somebody else in a different situation, it's like holding a lie and you finally, you know, saying, you know, something that isn't comfortable, but once you say it, it's like there may be a lot of consequences, but it makes you feel a lot better. You know, it's just like, and I think for me, there's so much value to that, as much as it may be hard, and life is hard, truthfully, right? Life is really hard. And I think sometimes you have to just almost risk that for your own mental health and be able to feel good looking in the mirror. That was like my favorite, Sara, when you said that, like, I forget how you said it, but like looking in the mirror and being able to be like, you know what, like, I'm proud of myself. And I think that's so valuable for anybody.
Totally. Facing down yourself is one of the scariest things. But, you know, the work, I think like too, like the work that we do with the foundation and the people, the communities that we work in, you know, the thing that is so, I don't know, heartwarming feels like kind of a bit like Hallmark card way to say it, but there are so many people who are like, this is their life. Every day is about this connection with people, addressing these concerns, acknowledging these things, moving with the like changing with the language and the ideas, and just being flexible and nimble. Like when the government does something fucked up, you have this whole community and like chosen family of people who are out there like rooting for you, fighting for you, working for you. And I think for Tegan and I to sort of formalize that and be involved, you know, like not just as individuals, but like, you know, to like really determine that there was a way for us to include this work in everything we do, whether it's through the foundation or just in our own band, has given me a sense of it's not, correction's not the right word, but it's like I said before, like this is all just a journey, like me accepting myself and finding a way to love myself. Now it feels really wonderful to think that Tegan and I, with all this privilege, are able to sort of like institutionally redistribute back our energy, our money, our time, our resources, our connections back into this community that already exists, you know? And so, I mean, obviously we love when people want to support the work we're doing, but there are so many resources and so many people on the website, at the Tegan and Sara Foundation website, who are doing just incredible work all over North America. So I really recommend that you take a look.
No, thank you for saying that too. And we'll obviously put it in the chat, as well as we also will have a donation link for the Jed Foundation, which will, all the proceeds will go to mental health. So this is, yeah, I mean, this is the point, right? I mean, I love that you guys are doing that, because it's like bigger than anything really, in terms of just mental health, just being able to feel like you're changing someone's life, even for the people watching. Like it's kind of like, listen, we're not doctors or anything like that, like literally saving people's lives, but as a therapist or musicians or people like that, it's like you almost, the responsibility is there. And I think especially with you guys, you have a big impact on people. Massive.
I think all people benefit from donating your time, donating, period, being involved. We used to be small communities and we all had to like chip in, and the world has gotten so big and we're so global now. We're also international, and we think differently. And I think that there's something to be said for giving back to your community. And certainly for Sara and I, it's benefited us. And like Sara was saying, it's in our band, we talk all the time about the foundation, but one of the first things we did was create a massive resource list, because ultimately it's just about getting involved. We might not be the cause. Tegan and Sara Foundation might not be your cause, but find something you care about. It should be, you know, everyone's civic duty to give back to your community and care. And to say, I want to add one thing about the allies thing, you know, and actually to address that this year has been such a profound year for so many people with, you know, the racial justice movement and, you know, politics and what's been happening around the world and climate change. And it's very overwhelming. Yeah. And I think sometimes people really mean to be great allies or really mean to be good people or really think they're doing the right thing. And then when they get told that they're not, their instinct is to run away, be embarrassed, reject. And, you know, Sara's saying about self-educating on all these topics is really great. But I think the other thing that I would say to allies is it's really simple. Just think about anyone but yourself. Just think that like there are just so many people that aren't you. You know, for me, I always thought of myself as a marginalized person. I'm a woman, I'm queer, you know, those things were always at the forefront of my mind. And the second that I zoomed out, and saw my privilege and saw like how I was just omnipresent. I was always about me. We're all that way. We're always thinking about ourselves. And the second that I zoomed out, my compassion grew exponentially, my empathy grew exponentially. And I would just say to allies, zoom out, you know, acknowledge that your life is mostly about you. You see everything through your heteronormative, you know, cisgendered lens, and just zoom out. Just remember a million times a day, like if you're able-bodied, zoom out, remember that like you're able-bodied and you need to think outside of able-bodied likeness. And you know, this is what we say to all our awesome dudes in our life. We're always just like, you know, when they're like, what could I do to help? And I'm like, just take a chunk of each day and think about what it would be like to not be you, and what comes along with being you, and what makes your life easier. It makes it, you know, and I think all of us just need to do that. We would all benefit from a little more of that kind of constructive thinking each day about how we can help others and do more outside of our own little tiny community. You know, I think that would benefit all of us. So
I really love that. I mean, honestly, I 100% agree. There's something so cathartic about it.
Yeah.
Just because I think, again, it makes, again, it is in a way, it is therapy. I mean, Janice, I don't know if that's, maybe it's practice. I don't know. Is it part of it?
I was just gonna say, I mean, this is really great because one of the things that I've noticed that is such a wonderful paradox in a way is that the people who sometimes suffer the most are the best positioned as they go through to give the most, just because it opens their hearts to empathy and compassion if they can get to the other side. You know, that's the tricky part, and that's why I really love what you're doing, because it can be dicey in there, as you know, and people they're not always able to take the paths that deliver them into the space where they're ready to give back, and they feel like they've been able to access deeper wisdom and a desire to give. But a lot of people do. And in a way, this time feels like, at least that's the opportunity for everybody, regardless of where you sit. This is pushing everybody to their edge. And we don't know that we're resilient until we have something to be resilient in the face of. It's not an idea, it's a lived experience. So that, you know, the call to compassion, the call to empathy, the call to be the best self and to give back is so perfectly timed. I feel like that's the opportunity in this moment. But it's real, you know, it's not an idea. It's real. There's a lot of people on the edge right now. So just being able to reach out and help each other is really the only thing we have to offer.
I think the other big thing too is like, this popped into my head when you were just summing all that up so well, Janice, is like, I think also during this time to be also prepared to make mistakes and mess up and say the wrong thing. I think some of us become disengaged from some of these movements or some of these incredibly huge things, concepts and movements that are happening right now because we say or do the wrong thing, or we see other people being shamed. And I think we have to just push through that. It's the simplest thing in the world to just say, oh my goodness, I screwed up, or I used the wrong word. My deepest apologies. I'm educating myself right now. Thank you for correcting me. I think there's a lot of well-meaning people that are just like very afraid or feeling very called out. And I know this isn't necessarily a popular thing to say, but I'm going to say it because I know people who have made mistakes and they're having a hard time getting past it. It's like, you made a mistake and it is okay, but you got to get back on that horse. You got to get back out there and you can improve. You can be forgiven. You can learn, you can and keep going. And I hope for all of us out there right now, it's very overwhelming. Everything's moving very quickly. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of change on a lot of many fronts. Sarah and I are imperfect. We've made lots of mistakes in our career. We haven't always checked all the boxes. We didn't always think outside of ourselves. There were so many things we could have done sooner to better the world, to give back to our community, to change the tropes within our own industry, but we're doing it now. And when we're criticized for not doing it sooner, I say, absolutely, I acknowledge that. And you're right. And we're gonna do the best we can now. We're gonna make up for it now. Join us, keep educating us, and I think all of us need to do that right now too. Just you'll be okay. You might say or do the wrong thing, but we'll just keep going.
No, it's so true. I mean, even on an episode like this, I admit, coming into it, it's nerve-wracking because obviously I can't relate, but at the same time I have to be like, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I should learn. And obviously I have a lot of friends in the LGBTQ community. And I think for me, as long as you're well-intentioned, I think people will understand. And that's the thing that I've been trying to tell myself, even through the Black Lives Matter thing, because I feel like, again, there's so many things that I learned and was challenged by. And I think in it, you think you're being respectful, but you're really not. So that's the thing. And so sometimes it's good to be actually, no, that isn't cool. But it's not like it's not like they're putting you down. I feel like it is helping to educate you, because I think otherwise, how would you know? Right. So that is white privilege in that sense. So I think to be able to feel a little bit tense, it's only a glimpse of what they might feel or what you guys might feel. So for you to be actually, you're really off by saying that. And for me to feel bad is okay, well, I mean, that's good, because at the same time, it's that's the whole point. I think people should have to, it's just a glimpse into what that may look like. And I think, again, it's, goes back to the privilege thing that you're saying. So I actually appreciate this kind of stuff. And I find it amazing to hear about it and learn about it and just be involved in the conversation.
Such an important
100%.
conversation, and just judging by the comments, I think we've helped a lot of people today. And by we, I mean you guys, because I didn't really say or do too much here. But I think we should probably close it out soon. I will say we've gotten overwhelming comments and questions about Tegan's dog, Sarah's cat, and Sarah playing Minecraft, and Sarah's plants. So if you how's your dog? How are the plants? How are the cats? How's Minecraft? That would be very helpful.
I've never actually I can't even visualize what Minecraft looks like. Someone the other day told me that children can play it. I thought it was some kind of military game. I'm not aware of what Minecraft is. My cats are fine. Everything's good. Garden is dying. It's fall. I'm about to go out and rake leaves.
Oh my
God. Your dog is probably the most famous on this chat right now.
Damn.
Yeah, where boy or girl?
She's a girl. I appreciate the comments about the dog. Sarah has two very beautiful cats who we basically used to create social media content because we feel like we're kind of boring and also kind of protective of our private time. And so we really pushed the cats. We made merchandise with them, and they're just amazing and majestic animals, and they're very easily photographed. And I did speak for months and months and months during this whole pandemic about how hard my partner and I were trying to get a dog. We applied for about 10 billion dogs, but dogs have become like toilet paper up here. It just feels like, there just were no dogs, because the border was closed. We also don't have very many street dogs. Like we don't have any street dogs. So it's just harder to get one. But yeah, we did get a dog. She's 4 months old. Her name is Georgia, and she's half border collie. Well, dad might be border collie and something else. We're not really sure. And then the mom's German shepherd, and she's looks like a black baby bear. Like she's got like the snout of like a black bear. And we call her land shark because she bites everything, and it's really hard. And I wouldn't have changed a thing, and I would have never been talked out of it. But now we get up at like 5:30 in the morning and take her out to pee like 5,000 times a day. I'm very, very exhausted, but it's very rewarding, and she's extremely sweet. And I do find myself watching her just sleep when we're watching television. So I feel like maybe these are the beginnings of love.
Oh my God! Yes.
Being a mom, I can tell you that's exactly like being a mom.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So Janice, what you're telling me is that this is the beginning of love and connection that
I think you're there, man. I think you've already arrived. It just gets bigger from here. More complicated too.
Yes, it's very complicated. So, but thanks to everyone who watched and listened and posted comments, and major love to everybody out there who's struggling, and especially those with asking yourselves the big questions or coming to terms with big things right now. It is a really wild time. And Alex, I think actually I had never really thought of it, but you're right. There's so little distraction, especially social distraction right now. And this, I imagine, is like a really heavy time. So that was a very good insight.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate this. This has actually been so nice. And again, it's these things are like actual therapy sessions. You walk out being like, whew.
I know. I feel like we need to book Janice for another hour off. Like we can
I
just
know.
like stay
I was
on. Like
the same thing.
Me and Sarah and Alex, we just like actually could all of you sign off. We have some questions.
Well, Janice, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add, for people tuning in right now before we sign off, or anything that maybe?
Wait, can you tell us more about JED?
Yeah, exactly. Or reach out to
Foundation.
Yeah, so the JED Foundation is focused on addressing mental health and well-being for young adults and adolescents. We have a wealth of resources. I would direct you to the JED website, the Love is Louder website. Half of Us, Seize the Awkward. There's a number of sites off of the JED site that you can go to for great resources. And I think that the parting thoughts that I would leave here is just reach out to people. If there's people in your life, and this is a really tough time for a lot of people, and I think we're all kind of retreating inside, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it is where the gifts are. But as you know, a lot of people are going to struggle. So if there's anybody in your life that's just a little bit lonely or on the edge, I have tried to make a list of people in my life just to check in on regularly. So just reach out to people just to issue to provide support, and then also if people are struggling, to reach out for support. That's probably the most important thing to remember this time. And hang in there, we will get through it.
Yeah, and for example, too, Janice, like if people want to speak to you or any other therapist at JED, how is it just as simple as going to the website, or how do you suggest?
Yeah, I would go to the Jed website and just use the standard email there to reach out and ask for resources. If you want to connect with me, just, say that there. That's probably the best place. And then it'll get to me soon and I can reach back.
Okay. All right, you guys. Well, lots of love.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you again.
Yeah,
Of
thank you.
course.
Thanks to all of you.
Privilege. Thank you.
Till next time.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.